where did humanity come from on Earth? And in general, where did the Earth, the solar system, come from, and what was the real story of how humans appeared on Earth in ancient times? This is a mystery that has tormented many people for hundreds of thousands of years. We try to learn and unravel everything. Who are our creators? Where did life on Earth come from in the first place? How did humans appear on it? Were we the first? Where did the dinosaurs come from? What are they, anyway? Who discovered our planet? And what is special about us as a species? Why are we now seeing such close attention to the human race from other extraterrestrial civilizations? What unique features are there in our DNA? After all, scientists have long been saying that we have so-called junk DNA, meaning parts they don't understand the function of. But in reality, there is a profound mystery hidden within this secret that is now available for us to finally shed light on what it is and how it can be activated. And this really can and should be activated. We are directly approaching this time. Right now is a decisive moment for our civilization, when the fate of our destiny is being chosen. And indeed, our planet has come very close to the moment of a quantum transition. Today, we will meet with extraterrestrial civilizations, the creators of humanity, and ask them the question, were they the ones who created us or not? Maybe someone else created it, maybe they're just pretending to be the creators. Or maybe humanity was created by God from dust, and there were Adam and Eve who had some kind of apple. Let's deeply explore all these questions today. Let's investigate them. We are beginning an in-depth exploration with you of the ancient history of Earth, not based on what is taught in textbooks, but on direct sources from extraterrestrial civilizations who themselves witnessed and directly participated in these events. And we have started this series of live broadcasts dedicated to this topic. In addition to this broadcast, we will continue to investigate in chronological order, in chronological sequence, what happened on Earth. That is, right now, specifically in this broadcast, we will be touching on the very first moments of the emergence of humanity. The mystery that was embedded within us, where our DNA came from, and how the solar system was formed. And then later on, we will do another series of broadcasts together. If this video gets enough likes, views, subscriptions, and if there are many comments expressing a desire to explore other historical eras and what really happened there, we will conduct a thorough investigation together and possibly, even with the keepers of space and time, look into the past through the Akashic records and deeply study what truly happened. Because there are as many opinions on the internet as there are people. And now I would like to draw your attention to the fact that everything you are about to hear does not require you to believe it absolutely, because I am not claiming to be the ultimate authority on the truth. What you are about to hear from me will be a combination of my own knowledge as well as channeling from extraterrestrial civilizations. You will be asking questions, and together with my assistant, who is off camera, we will read out the best and most relevant questions you have on this topic. And we have prepared some very interesting questions for you, which can also help us delve deeper into this subject. So get ready, prepare your questions, and keep your ears wide open. But we will only be reading questions related to this topic. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that in future broadcasts, we will also be holding live interviews, various videos and streams on different topics. And my goal is not to give you some kind of surrogate information that you won't know what to do with. In my broadcasts, I always try to provide information not just as knowledge, but as practical guidance and an understanding of the purpose why you need it. This is not entertainment content. This is a deep exploration of yourself. So as you listen now, you don't need to believe me, and you don't need to believe everything you hear. There is a lot of falsehood on the internet these days, and I want you to learn how to separate the wheat from the chaff, to identify information. So start practicing right now. And as you listen to me, turn your attention to your spiritual heart and ask yourself, Does this resonate within me or does it repel me? Listen to your heart and do not trust your eyes or your mind, because with each passing year, there will be more and more falsehood in the world. I will hold the field as powerfully as I am able. Right now, I can already feel representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations entering my space. They are already here. And now, before they begin to interact, I can already sense their energy. They are creating a space. I will tell you about what truly makes us deeply reflect on the origin of the Earth. Scientists who study space astronomers while examining other planetary systems have discovered that there is an enormous number of planetary systems whose structure is very different from our solar system. That is, in space, binary and triple star systems are usually encountered. This is more common than single stars. In other words, single stars like our one sun are actually quite rare in space, strange as that may seem. For example, Sirius is a binary system, Sirius A and Sirius B. In the Pleiades, there are a lot of binary stars, and around the star Pleion actually, there is a system of 3 stars where our Pleiadian members of the Galactic Federation of Light reside. And here we start to realize that our system is somewhat unique, but maybe we once had another additional star. Maybe it faded away or something else happened. Or maybe there really is some planet Nibiru. Or maybe there actually are some Anunnaki who have enslaved someone there. Friends, in our series of broadcasts dedicated to the ancient history of Earth, we will answer all these questions. So subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and don't miss the upcoming videos. Subscribe to our Telegram so that you can always find out when such a broadcast will take place. Now I'm going to show you an interesting picture. Here's the solar system, and we used to seeing it like this. In front of the sun is the planet Mercury, then Venus, then Earth. This is the inner ring of the solar system, and then comes Mars and the asteroid belt. Now I'll show you another picture. This one, take a look. Our solar system is arranged in such a way that close to the sun we have some small tiny planets, like Mercury. You can see it to the left, near the Sun, Venus, Earth and Mars. In fact, and after Mars, there is also the mysterious asteroid belt, which, by the way, also appeared as a result of extraterrestrial activity by other civilizations. We'll talk about that separately. Then comes Jupiter, a rather large planet, followed by Saturn, Uranus and Neptune. So, in our solar system, the large planets are, as it were, pushed further back. And when we see this as astronomers, do actually looks as if something went off plan, because normally in space, what astronomers usually observe in a natural environment is that the largest planets orbit closest to the star on the first orbit. In other words, first they should be Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and then out on the periphery, all the smaller stuff like Mercury, Earth, and so on. So the situation we see in our solar system is not typical for natural conditions in space. It feels as if someone rearranged our solar system, literally took the planets and placed them into the right configuration. Today we're going to ask this question: who did this? And did it really happen? And what is even more interesting and shocking to many scientists who cannot understand how this is possible is that if we measure the distance from the Sun to Mercury, and then multiply that distance by about 2, I'm not going to give you the exact number right now, but it's roughly 210, we can calculate the orbits of each subsequent planet. In other words, our solar system also follows mathematical laws. Like a precisely calibrated mechanism, just like in a clock, where every gear is perfectly matched. Our solar system is arranged as if someone had constructed it artificially. So first comes Mercury. Then if you take Mercury's orbit and roughly double it, please, I ask you, don't write me hate comments saying, the exact number is such and such. We're not going to get into those kinds of details or argue about it right now. That's not important to us. What matters is the essence. When we multiply the distance to the next planet by this coefficient, the same coefficient allows us to roughly calculate the orbit of almost every subsequent planet. In other words, each next planet is about twice as far away. How could that possibly happen by chance? Obviously, this already starts to seem a bit too orderly to be accidental. If we take our solar system and look at it from the perspective of asteroid safety, it also seems to be arranged in a rather magical way. Jupiter, which orbits on the outskirts of the solar system along with the other large gas giants, creates a kind of gravitational trap for all the outer asteroids. In other words, asteroids and meteorites flying through space are literally sucked in by Jupiter and Saturn like a vacuum cleaner and diverted away from Earth. It's as if this was done on purpose to protect Earth from asteroids. And there was even a famous case a few years ago, I can't remember exactly when scientists discovered an asteroid that could have actually hit Earth. They observed as it passed near Jupiter. And then a miracle happened, something the scientists hadn't calculated. They didn't expect this at all, but they saw through their telescopes how this asteroid, out of nowhere, suddenly changed course and crashed into Jupiter. It's as if perhaps someone even deliberately pushed it there. And you could see the impact, by the way. An asteroid of that size would have completely destroyed Earth, almost torn it to pieces, because it was so huge. And so when we see this, even if someone who doesn't believe in aliens at all watches this broadcast, if you send it to them, a real question arises: why did this happen? Could it really be that someone engineered this? Or maybe something truly magical is happening here in our solar system? Maybe it's special in some way? Let's try to answer these questions. And there's another very important question that comes up. Why is it that our moon is positioned exactly as it is? Why is it always facing us with the same side? We will also be looking for answers to these questions. Maybe we won't have time to answer everything during this broadcast, but if any important questions remain, we'll definitely write them down and address them in future broadcasts. So be sure to subscribe and set a reminder for the upcoming broadcasts. To begin with, let's take a look at what we are starting from, what theories exist about the origin of life on Earth. Well, first of all, there are various esoteric theories, starting with the idea that we were created by gods, like Adam and Eve, right? God came, took earth, dust, clay, molded Adam and Eve from it, and thus humans appeared. Let's take this story and simply say that it is a kind of metaphorical tale, just like there are metaphors, some fairy tales, parables. This is a metaphor that was given to people when, about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, simply because otherwise they wouldn't have understood it. They wouldn't have understood if they had been told what DNA is, who these gods are, where they came from. So they were simply told in a way they could comprehend at the time. And that's why we won't argue about how exactly it really happened back then. I want you to take what you've just heard not on faith, but simply to analyze it for yourself and see what useful insight you can draw from it. Even if your worldview differs from what you hear, even if there are discrepancies with what others say, you don't need to immediately draw a line and say, no, that's wrong, or definitely not true. I believe something else, because that's dualism. Take from this information your share of truth, your share of benefit, because in any case, there can always be some distortions everywhere. We also know other theories about the creation of humanity. For example, there's the theory that we descended from apes. As ordinary people say that we evolved, and then at some point an ape suddenly became intelligent. But for some reason, ape skeletons are found, while the skeletons of giants are hidden. They don't show that there were once some very tall people on Earth. They find the skeletons of these half apes, half humans, but there is no missing link between them and humans. Let's try to figure this out together. Maybe those alien skeletons never existed at all. Maybe we actually arrived here and settled on this planet, or maybe life didn't originate on Earth at all. And maybe humans originally arrived here and did not emerge on this planet at all. And why are we so interesting to aliens? See how many questions there are? Now we're going to answer all of them. We'll start with this topic and take it step by step. First, I'll give you a thorough introduction, laying out the foundation and explaining what is already known in this area. After that, once we've covered the basics, I'll hand it over to the next speaker. Yes, they're asking me to first explain the basics, and then we'll move on to channeling and start asking questions directly to the Pleiadians and the Keepers of History. So right now, the Pleiadian Keepers of History are present here. They will be sharing information about what happened. But to begin with, I want to say that life in the solar system originated not only on Earth, they're already prompting me now. Saying life in the solar system originally began not just on Earth. The first planet where life emerged was Venus. Life on Venus was quite diverse, incredibly vast, and remarkably abundant, and many different types of living beings thrived there. Amphibians were especially predominant, as were the expansive oceans and the wide variety of oceanic species, until over time rather large continents ultimately appeared. After that, life arose on Earth and on Mars. And thus there were as many as 3 planets in the solar system where life originated. They were all within the habitable zone, but the configuration of the planetary system was different. During the period of time when life was emerging on Earth and on Venus, in fact, Earth was farther from the Sun and solar activity was higher. Because of this, the habitable zone was shifted a bit farther out. In addition to the Sun, there was a second star in the solar system which orbited in an elongated elliptical path. The size of this star was approximately, how much was it? It was about 25% the size of the Sun. So there was another star and several planets orbited around it as well. They orbited at a distant path so that this star would sometimes pass by the solar system like this without passing through its inner part. In other words, it didn't pass through the inner part of the solar system, but orbited at a distant range. This happened billions of years ago. At that time, life on Earth was in its earliest stages. It was only just beginning, but then a catastrophe occurred in the form of multiple meteorite impacts, and Earth's development was slowed down, giving Venus and Mars the lead in the development of life. Life on Venus and Mars is now considered more ancient because, as many scientists believe, the first primitive proto-microorganisms appeared there, which then, after the global catastrophe on Earth, migrated to Earth by traveling on asteroids. And the microorganisms on Earth are actually those that were brought here from Venus and Mars. Symbolically, this may be reflected in your epics as the union of feminine and masculine energy, because Venus was seen as the ancestral mother, Mars as the ancestral father, and Earth as their child. Life on Earth, in essence, is a combination of those organisms that originally arose and developed on Mars and Venus. In parallel with this process, as both biospheres gradually developed and evolved over time, the 2 separate biospheres independently formed and created a variety of different and unique life forms. Initially, before physical bodies existed, life was first sent to Earth in the form of non-corporeal spirits, rather than in any physical or material form. Before the appearance of dense material intelligent beings like you, humans, luminous beings were sent from the core of the galaxy to Earth, Mars, and Venus beings you might call plasmoids or angels. Their bodies were ethereal, energetic, with absolutely pure souls that had not yet taken any form. They were the original progenitors of the souls that later developed on Earth and Venus. We, as Pleiadians, want you to understand that life first arises on the subtle, energetic, and spiritual plane, and then becomes denser and manifests at the material level. The emergence of physical, dense material bodies occurs only indirectly, after the original light beings of the spiritual world have come into existence. That is why initially the settlement of the solar system began from Venus. The order of the planets in the solar system used to be different. Venus was farther from the sun than Earth, and it had moons. Mars was roughly in the same place as it is now, and beyond Mars there was another planet. Venus was inhabited by beings of light long before terrestrial life appeared on Earth. At that time, Earth was almost entirely covered by ocean, with only a small area of land accessible, and it was barren. The primary processes of life formation were underway in the form of a primordial soup. But the beings of the spiritual world who came to Venus began to create an energy-based civilization there, which, through working with energies condensed through subtle material realms, gradually taking on form. When the local animals became sufficiently developed, the species that emerged from the water gained intelligence, and for the first time, intelligent beings of an angelic nature began to incarnate in them. They lived on Venus, creating their bodies in the likeness and image of the anthropomorphic civilizations to which they considered themselves to belong. And for a long time, this life on Venus was wonderful and prosperous for them until distortions and division began to accumulate within them. In their ongoing and earnest attempts to truly understand one another, they gradually began to distinguish, to differentiate, to separate themselves into various categories, thereby creating dualistic notions of what is considered good and what is regarded as bad, which people are seen as beautiful and which are not, who is thought to be more worthy and who is seen as less worthy of life. And the accumulation of this division let me just ask the Pleiadians now, so that we can get closer to the topic of life on Earth. Because Venus and Mars are very interesting, and I think we need several separate broadcasts dedicated specifically to Venus and Mars. So now chronologically we'll shift a bit and focus on Earth. Yes, life moved across Venus and Mars, developed on them, and at the same time, independently of them, it continued to develop on Earth. At that time, the solar system had not yet been noticed or discovered by extraterrestrial civilizations. The first extraterrestrial civilizations to discover Earth were not from the Galactic Federation of Light, although our representatives were present here on the etheric and subtle planes, visiting through your sun in the form of plasmoids, but there were no dense material, physical contacts with Earth. It was first discovered by the reptilians, a highly advanced and ancient species who had borders of spheres of influence that were actively and quite aggressively expanding during that period, as they were constantly seeking new territories for colonization and settlement. When they eventually discovered Earth, life already existed here in the form of dinosaurs, as well as other forms of civil reptilian life, which was extremely abundant and diverse on this planet at that particular time. The reptiloid civilization, together with other scientists from their group, saw great potential in Earth and the solar system, and they wanted to settle it, even though they did not have an agreement or permission from other civilizations, which by that time were already migrating here energetically by sending their souls as messages. When they began interacting with the dinosaurs, the reptiloids developed a desire to create an intelligent species on Earth from the DNA, that was already present in the dinosaurs. They took the most intelligent species of dinosaurs that existed on Earth and tried to crossbreed them with their own DNA. Their experiments were unsuccessful, and for quite a long time they were unable to achieve stable results or produce species that were truly capable of surviving. But they did not stop their experiments at the moment when representatives of the Galactic Federation of Light discovered Earth. When this happened, the reptilian civilizations did not put up any resistance, because Mars and Venus had already been inhabited by the souls of light beings. Therefore, they did not oppose the arrival of new energies on Earth. A global process was underway to prepare the planet for a quantum transition, as an energetic leap of the first kind was taking place on your planet. We warned the representatives of the reptilian civilizations that this would not be the most favorable place for the race, because the energy that will come to this planet will raise its vibrations and change them, as a result of which the entire biosphere will change, and the species of dinosaurs currently inhabiting it will either change or perish. We warned them about this. Therefore, as a result of long disagreements and contradictions that arose between us and them, it was decided to create a joint project to observe the evolution of Earth. When we made contact with the reptilians, they were extremely dissatisfied with having to put up with other opinions. They believed that they were the rightful masters of this planet, and they even made attempts at military confrontation with our races in order to establish their total control over the planet. But since their technology was rather primitive, they were unable to do this, and we offered them the chance to work peacefully on the Earth project, giving the planet itself and the souls that exist here the opportunity to choose their own destiny and independently create the form of life that they will encode using energies. And we left the Earth for a long time, staying on the sidelines and observing how evolution unfolded. We only intervened partially, helping certain types of intelligent beings to develop and protecting the planet from external threats and total destruction. As a result of evolution, after observing for many hundreds and thousands of years, the formation of semi-intelligent beings occurred. Thanks to the fact that nature spirits of an anthropomorphic form were sent to Earth, they began to influence the unintelligent animal species of that time from the subtle plane. This is the natural way life forms on any planet in the cosmos. Initially, subtle material beings from the spiritual world, whom you call plasmoids, come to every planet. They begin to interact with the planet's biosphere and influence the DNA of living beings from the subtle plane, correcting it and helping to filter out only those that correspond to more favorable outcomes. In this way, they influence the creation of beings similar to us from the subtle plane. But in the course of this evolution, the evolutionary branch dedicated to the potential development of the reptilian race was lost, because a quantum transition occurred on Earth. The first quantum transition, which marked a shift in energetic planes, caused major disturbances throughout the entire planetary sphere. This was accompanied by disasters and cataclysms, as it was the first such striking process in Earth's history. Events of a cosmic scale took place, about which we can tell you more in detail. It was the first war for Earth, when the reptilians decided it was time to end this experiment ahead of schedule. And some of their representatives invaded the solar system in order to establish a blockade around the planet and begin settling their own species on this planet, thereby interrupting its natural evolution, seizing Mars and Venus. As a result of this invasion, a global military conflict broke out, during which some satellites orbiting Earth and Mars, where our bases were located, were completely destroyed, and a huge amount of debris from these satellites scattered throughout the solar system and, of course, struck Mars, Venus, and Earth as well. As a result, the biosphere of that time, especially considering that the process of quantum transition was also underway, suffered irreparable damage, which ultimately led to the reptilians, who had sought to establish control over Earth, causing the destruction of reptilian life forms on the planet. Because the fallen fragments of these celestial bodies triggered massive waves, cataclysms, and destruction, as a result of which the Earth became shrouded in a layer of aerosol and dust. But we knew this would happen. We knew they would go through with it, and we knew it would be necessary for our future. After they did this, most of the reptilian civilizations were removed, expelled from the solar system. They were forbidden from interfering. However, a conglomerate of peaceful reptilians still remained in our scientific coalition. They were allowed to be present as researchers under the agreement and contract that had been signed with them for the study of Earth. They were allowed to stay and leave some of their representatives to study the ongoing processes on Earth and to help eliminate the consequences of their attack. The reptilian civilizations were tasked with participating in the cleansing of Earth, as well as rescuing species of dinosaurs that had been affected by the destructive events. So some of the animals and species that existed on Earth at that time were able to be saved. They were relocated to other planets, where they still exist today, almost unchanged. Some of these dinosaurs were moved into cavities deep within the Earth, where greenhouse-like conditions were created for them, similar to arcs. Inside your Earth, there are enormous cavities, comparable in size to cities, within the Earth's crust, where a constant temperature and humidity are maintained, and there are sources of light. In these unique and isolated cavities, certain species that have managed to survive continuously since that ancient time still exist today, living in what can be described as a sort of natural reserve or sanctuary. Here, they have been carefully preserved by the stable conditions of their environment, ensuring that their valuable genetic information is not lost to time, but instead maintained and protected for future generations and for the continued diversity of life on our planet. Then the Earth was given time to recover. The species on Earth began to change. We actively participated in helping to restore the Earth, giving it the opportunity to regain its biological diversity. And at that time, proto-intelligent primate species began to appear on Earth, which resembled us in form and proportions. These were primitive apes, and we decided to observe whether they could develop to the point of gaining intelligence. But over a long period of time, as we watched them, we did not detect any signs of intelligence. And for a very long time, which dragged on, the Earth was being brought closer to a second quantum transition. The second quantum transition was supposed to occur when your solar system completed a quarter of its orbit around the galactic core. At that moment, you entered the photon belt again, and an evolutionary leap was necessary. The nature spirits who were overseeing Earth at that time requested assistance from the Galactic Federation of Light, and a great and global council was held regarding the fate of planet Earth. Our beings, our representatives, who are able to see into the future, discovered and calculated that Earth is located in a zone that could potentially play a huge role in the evolution of the entire galaxy. And angels of the highest order, who are beings of a subtle spiritual plane, came from the core of the galaxy as representatives of ancient civilizations and pointed to Earth as a place from which light would spread throughout the galaxy in the future, also indicating several other planets located in other parts of this galaxy. Earth is one of them, and then a decision was made at the Global Galactic Council to select species that would establish a new intelligent race on Earth, one that would be prepared for the global project of uniting the galaxy. A unification in a single light, the dissolution of boundaries and conflicts. Since several wars and conflicts had already taken place around Earth, the quantum field had already been imprinted with the energy of opposition and contradiction from those civilizations that fought over Earth. That is why it was precisely those who were originally enemies of each other that the galactic elders chose to participate in the creation of life on Earth. Among these groups were the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, and representatives from Sirius, coalition from Andromeda, representatives from the Cygnus constellation were involved as well. And there were also representatives from the Orion constellation, among whom were the reptilians, since they too took part in these events. They were tasked with creating a new species on Earth by using the DNA of a local species of ape and adding fragments of their own representatives' DNA to it. However, since the reptilians, in their determined attempt to seize Earth, used force and tried to take it over in violation of peaceful agreements, as a result, their share of DNA was ultimately reduced to 5%, which they themselves specifically selected to be added to the DNA of the future intelligent species. From that time on, a base was established on Earth, a primary base for the creation of life. It was located on the territory of present-day Africa, and there, in the warm and unique equatorial climate zone, research was conducted on crossbreeding and recreating the Earth's human race. These studies lasted 100 Earth years. During this time, we carefully selected the right DNA with the participation of spiritual beings, angels and archangels, who oversaw this process to ensure that the earthly being would be endowed with the most favorable qualities of extraterrestrial civilizations. All the DNA of the aforementioned beings was incorporated into this DNA. 5% was contributed by the reptilians. 6% was contributed by Sirius. 3% was contributed by Arcturus. 20% was contributed by the Pleiades. The remainder was contributed by Orion and Cygnus. From their constellations came civilizations of a similar kind, which were related to the Pleiades. That is why, overall, they were similar. The rest of the DNA was taken from various primate species, including, for example, chimpanzees and gorillas. But the DNA was encoded in such a way that its full potential would not be revealed all at once. Your DNA is a highly intelligent biocomputer containing ancient memories from the moment we created it. Just think about that for a moment. Each of you now has billions of living cells in your body. Every single cell contains DNA chromosomes, and these DNA chromosomes are in fact an immortal molecule that has simply changed its combinations over time. But this is the only thing that has been passed down from the very moment you were created here to the moment where you are now. No other matter was transmitted, only DNA was divided and passed from generation to generation. And now, within every cell, you remember the moment when this original DNA was embedded in you. Many of your DNA strands are non-endemic to the planet. And that is why they went into a completely dormant, hidden state. The reptilians were extremely dissatisfied that the percentage of their DNA turned out to be so small. They formed a certain conspiracy around themselves as a coalition of reptilian civilizations that began to devise a plan to undermine the entire experiment. Because they believed that the Earth still belonged to them, since they were the first to discover it, and they consider it their property. Since then, discord has arisen between your civilizations and the reptilian civilization. We are not racist and do not believe that any civilizations are inherently good or bad. But reptilians are often aggressive in their policies and in their desire to dominate and control through military force. They organize sabotage at the primary base in an attempt to destroy humans even before they could spread. And after that, they were removed from the experiment and completely expelled. Although they still had DNA samples and continue to have access to reptilian underground bases, they continued their experiments and managed to create an intelligent species of reptilian being on Earth. But they kept this species hidden from us for a long time in their underground arcs. Their species still exists to this day, parallel to yours. And this is precisely what explains the intense competition between different alien races for your planet. Since this planet is located in a unique position from the perspective of galactic astronomy and will undergo the process of quantum transition many more times, which you are currently experiencing, many civilizations also want to tap into this energy to receive an evolutionary impulse for themselves. We are interested in ensuring that all of this happens only in an environmentally responsible way. Therefore, when this happened, the experiment continued without the involvement of the reptilians. We began to develop the intelligent human species, and then several branches of human evolution were created, as different races took on the guidance of different groups of people. After the global cataclysms and the impact of an asteroid on Earth, there was active movement of the lithospheric plates, which caused the continents to shift, change their shape, and the climate began to differ across the various continents. Therefore, we made the decision to divide your species into several different groups. And this was the original plan. When your division occurred, we initiated the activation of different DNA in each of the separate types of nationalities to form various predispositions depending on the planetary systems that contributed their DNA there. That is why in some races there are higher percentages of different types of DNA. Your eye colors, your facial shapes, and even your ears may in part remind you of us. But right now, we want to say something very important. Something that some people who previously received information from us have overlooked. Not a single race on Earth is truly different from the others. You are all human, a single race. The experiment of Earth is for such different beings who have spread across the planet, who have hundreds of different languages, beliefs, and nationalities, to overcome conflicts and achieve peace by realizing that there is no difference between them. This is the global task and lesson for your race. You are learning to do this, which is why no race on Earth is dominant. No one is better than another. This is something you must always remember and be aware of. There are no higher or lower quality races, no more or less worthy ones. The lesson of transformation and overcoming xenophobia is what you are going through right now. This is exactly what will influence your further evolution. We are ready to conclude the introductory part of the information. What we have just conveyed was very concise, compact, only the most essential and basic points. But by asking questions, you can explore the topics that interest you the most. So now they are ready to answer questions. Now I'm going to show you exactly what the Pleiadians, Arcturians, representatives of Sirius, and reptilians actually look like. So I am waiting for your questions.
Well, let's start from the beginning then.
Yes, speak louder.
The question is about where did the dinosaurs come from, if they were already there? Who created them before the reptiloids arrived there?
The laws of evolution in the universe really do exist. Not everything is a creator, because this is a question similar to which came first, the chicken or the egg. If there is some form of life, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone had to artificially create it. The universe was designed by the creator in such a way that life, under suitable conditions, can develop on its own according to certain harmonious laws. It arises on its own and naturally develops on planets of the appropriate kind. Even if there is no interference in this process at all, but at the moments when life begins to develop, the spirits of nature, plasmoids, and some of your Earth's inhabitants who are in contact with them participate in the formation of life. You call these people shamans, and when they interact with plasmoids, they refer to them as gods who created humanity or the inhabitants of nature. Plasmoids are capable of forming mental images of various animal species through the subtle plane, and these mental images influence the formation of flora and fauna on your planet. So for example, if a plasmoid imagines a flower, conceives of it, and let's say creates a sort of blueprint, then a real plant begins to form according to that blueprint. In other words, plasmoids create an energetic matrix so that matter can then take shape from it. Highly developed plasmoids can exist for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years, and are capable of forming large animals and even intelligent species, such as humans. That's why, yes, life on Earth originally began in the form of the reptilian race, in the form of dinosaurs. But before the dinosaurs, life also originated on Venus and Mars. There's a separate story there as well. That's why later on people migrated from Mars to Earth, So we haven't touched on that topic yet. But now the Pleiadians are telling me that we've just talked about the emergence of the intelligent human species on Earth. But the people who live on Earth now are already hybrids, descendants from Mars. The races you heard about from your sources and other channeled materials like Hyperborea, Atlantis, and Lemuria are essentially different representatives of different races. Those whom you call Lemurians were beings that we created on Earth as a result of crossbreeding intelligent species, non-intelligent ape species, and our own DNA. But at the same time, life was also being created on Mars and on Venus. And the descendants of the Martian civilization, after a global catastrophe on Mars, were relocated to Earth and intermingled with the Earth inhabitants. They also showed a lot of pictures showing that Martians and Venusians had reached a high level of technology and could travel between planets, and they had primitive spaceships. Even before the fall of their civilization, they could come to Earth and make contact with humans. In some places, Martians even established cities and colonies. So the Martians would come and interact with Earthlings, while humans at that time still lived like, Papuans. They made contact with them and sometimes interbred. That is, they established colonies and produced offspring together. And when, for example, the Holy Scripture, the Bible says, and the sons of God came down from the heavens and took the daughters of men as wives. That's exactly how it's written. And children were born to them. This is precisely what it's referring to, that other races came. But these were not Pleiadians because their DNA is too different from ours. If they had entered into physical contact with us, for example, it is unlikely that healthy children would have been born from that. But with Martians and Venusians, fertile offspring could be born, and they intermingled with each other. So this mixing was taking place, and that's partly why there is such diversity on Earth. As well as deep-rooted conflicts, these were also caused by the fact that many Martians came to Earth, many Venusians came to Earth, along with the native Earthlings themselves. And all of this mixed together into a kind of stew, which made society become very divided. And there are some countries on Earth where the percentage of Martian DNA is higher, some where the percentage of Venusian DNA is higher, and others where the percentage of Earthling DNA is greater. Please ask your questions.
By the way, there was a question, can we say, for example, that the Asian race...
Louder.
Is it possible to say that the Asian race has more genes from reptiles, or that, say, Europeans have more genes from the Pleiades?
They're saying now to me, no, there is really no such difference between you, because especially each one of you has the same amount of genes from all of those various civilizations. But the way they manifest can be different, since genes do not completely determine your appearance. Your appearance is primarily determined by energies. That is, genes can be either unread or read. Some are expressed phenotypically, while others remain encrypted. That's why certain parts of your DNA remain dormant. You can activate them. It is a big mistake to think that one race has more of certain genes, because on Earth this leads to division and conflict, specifically racial confrontation, when one race believes they are better than others and thinks that if another race has more reptilian genes, then they should be destroyed because they are bad. That's not true. All of you have roughly the same percentage of all genes.
There was also a question about who were the Neanderthals then, and the Australopithecines. I mean, Homo sapiens didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Those are the primary species that served as the basis. In other words, their DNA was used for the experiment. These species were considered promising for the emergence of intelligent life, but they lived for many hundreds of thousands of years and never developed intelligence.
So they were created?
They weren't created. I mean, they were created by energetic plasmoids. Plasmoids would come and form them, but they just didn't develop, didn't progress. It's like our modern apes. Yeah, like take chimpanzees, for example. They seem very intelligent, right? You can teach them something. They look like humans, gorillas, chimpanzees, but they've existed for millions of years in exactly the same form. They don't evolve. Let me clarify. I see the question. Does the planet Phaeton really exist? And was there a nuclear war there? It's not that it exists now, it used to exist, and that's a separate topic. We'll discuss it. It's from a different era. Go ahead, ask.
There's a question. Did the Greys really take part in the actual creation of humans as well?
At that time, those whom you call the Greys were not involved in the creation of humanity. They were focused on developing their own empire because back then they were at the height of their expansion into space, just beginning to interact with other races. And at that time, their society was still very bright and prosperous. They were not as aggressive and insensitive as they are now. Their society was developing along a technogenic path, specifically one focused on technological advancement, and this technogenic aspect continually kept increasing its share within their race until the balance was tipped toward complete computerization of their species, as a result of which they gradually began to lose their emotions and emotional depth. At that time, they were not yet interested in Earth. That happened, their interest in Earth arose much later.
Why was it necessary to use ape genes if there are other genes in the GFS genetic bank, for example, from the Atlantean civilization?
Because the main objective was not to colonize Earth. You have to understand that there is a big difference in how life arises on planets. Life doesn't just appear because someone came and created it there by populating it from the outside. Life is formed over a long period of time based on profound spiritual laws of formation. There is a deep process of quantum karmic formation occurring at the level of every cell and DNA molecule. According to the divine laws that we follow, no other civilization has the right to introduce foreign DNA to a planet to which it does not belong without the consent of the local species, without the emergence of a local species. It is extremely easy to populate a planet with already existing species, but in that case, nothing new will emerge. There would be no development of diversity. It would simply be copying what already exists, and that means there will be no evolutionary growth for civilizations. That is why it is so important to use as a foundation the DNA that originated on this planet as its rightful representatives, and then only partially add elements that can stimulate development but not create something from scratch. A larger percentage of our DNA or DNA that was contributed by us, specifically 60%, still remains undiscovered by you.
There's a question about eye color. Is it possible to determine which race a person is connected to by their eye color?
A person is connected to all races of extraterrestrial beings.
What would the eye color be, for example? Is it more?
No, you can't. Because eye color does not determine where you are from or which civilization you are connected to. You are connected to all of them. In essence, you are all on Earth, no matter what color your eyes, hair, or skin are. You are all brothers descended from a single mother. You are all brothers and sisters. You all share a common ancestor.
Alright, here's a question about the planets. So, what happened to the second star that was next to the Sun?
That star went out.
Why?
Because the ancient conflict that took place in the solar system was not only described in connection with the reptilian civilization, there were also other races of extraterrestrial civilizations that tried to colonize the solar system, including the second system that orbited not far from the Sun. That system was inhabited by races of a different kind. They appeared there and then actually they didn't originate there. They settled there from elsewhere and lived for a long time, planning to develop to a level where they could move to Earth. But their star was a small, dim red dwarf, and it was inevitably cooling down over time. Over the course of many, many years, its faint glow gradually weakened so much that eventually it faded away completely, and as a result, all life around it ultimately ceased to exist. Those representatives migrated from there. Some of them relocated to Earth, interacted with the ancient Egyptians even while still on Mars, with an ancient Egypt that was older than your Egypt, with Martian Egypt, and they tried to enslave people because they firmly believed with unwavering conviction that they had the right to do so. They arrived on Earth, presenting themselves either as teachers who claimed to offer guidance and wisdom, or as masters who asserted their authority and control, depending on the specific situation and circumstances they encountered. Most of their interactions were with Mars, but over time they themselves degenerated, and most of them migrated to another system since they were not allowed to enslave humanity, and the Pleiadians expelled them. That's the answer. It's hard for me to accept this information.
I didn't understand what happened to the Sun. The Sun, which
It's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still in the same place. That is, it moves along an elongated orbit, but it's like a stone. You can see it. It's gone out. It's extinguished. That is, it has completely gone out, cooled down. There might be some residual radiation coming from it, but it's almost impossible to detect it from Earth. That is, it could be detected with highly precise instruments, but you'd have to send such an instrument almost to the edge of the solar system, far away, because the orbit is very elongated.
no, I understand. And about the artificial moon, a question: is it true that it is an artificial structure
The moon, which moon?
near the Earth?
Near the Earth.
Yeah,
So the question is it true that the moon is hollow?
artificially created
Artificially created.
for some purpose, in particular.
The origin of the moon, as we currently understand it, is considered to be completely natural. However, its present position in the sky is widely regarded as artificial. Originally, it was located at a different orbital level before the global conflict that occurred about 13,000 years ago. It really does have a lot of cavities, and the core of the satellite is shifted to one side. That is, most of the moon's mass is shifted toward one edge, which means that the distribution of material inside the moon is not even. This uneven mass distribution is the reason why on the far side of the moon side you can't see from Earth large cavities or basins tend to form. Additionally, this imbalance leads to a phenomenon known as tidal locking, which is a gravitational effect that causes the moon to always rotate in such a way that only one side ever faces the Earth, while the other side remains hidden from our view. On the far side of the moon, within these enormous cavities, there are cities of extraterrestrial civilizations that serve as a platform for interplanetary interaction. There are bases of completely different intelligent beings from all over the galaxy located there, and this area has been declared a neutral zone. No one has the right to seize or take control of it. It is governed by the Galactic Council, and quantum gates are located there, which enable the transportation of large spacecraft that are not equipped with gravitational jump engines. Large ships pass through the gates directly into the solar system using the system of ancient gates created by an ancient civilization. Some of these gates were placed on the far side of the moon. Thanks to these gates, we can travel very quickly, not only within our own galaxy, but also to other galaxies. That is why you are visited not only by nearby civilizations, but also by very distant ones, such as Andromeda and several other galaxies, which you refer to by combinations of numbers and letters.
So, are there forces in the universe capable of moving satellites and planets?
The Pleiadians actually possess such forces. They have gravitational technologies. When a planet is gravitationally captured and gravity is warped in front of it, this is what they are showing me now. It's as if, well, if you take a large ball, set it down, and then dig a trench underneath it, the ball will roll along that trench. When they need to move a large planet, they send a special kind of sphere ahead of the planet. In other words, it's a spherical spacecraft. Inside it, there's a process that resembles the creation of a black hole. That is, inside this ship, there is a sealed megasphere, like a Dyson sphere, and it spins like this. Shake, 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 shake. The rings are spinning, and inside these rings, a micro black hole is suspended, in other words, a microscopic black hole. And they transport this black hole on the ship like what's it called, a tugboat, and it's as if they're pulling the planet along, pressing space-time onto it with the gravity of the black hole, and the planet seems to roll after this black hole until it's moved to the desired location.
Then ask them who and why rearranged the planets so beautifully and lined them up so evenly. So, what was the plan? For what purpose?
There is the most ancient civilization in our galaxy, which we call the ancients. The duration of their existence is limitless. They are immortal and can transition from one incarnation to another. Their energies are comparable to the energies of the seraphim. It is they who have come now, the ancients. The ancients inhabit a network of stars located very close to the core of the galaxy. They created networks of spatial tunnels that, like a subway, pierce the entire galaxy with gateways. When life first emerges anywhere in the vast expanse of the galaxy, they are always the very first to observe and witness this new life. The ancients have existed for a period even longer than the Milky Way galaxy itself, since they were, in fact, the ones who originally created it. They are, in essence, the master architects for all of us. Where did they come from, truly? From previous periods of the universe's recreation, from other forms of Manvantara, when other cycles of the universe's birth and collapse occurred, the ancients remained as a single arc of knowledge. And the ancients always have a certain plan. They have a global cosmic plan for the evolution of the entire system, stretching many billions of years into the future. According to this plan, they place active points in the galaxy where evolutionary leaps and transitions will occur, in order to accumulate the evolutionary path of civilization throughout this Manvantara. And it is these civilizations of the ancients that lay the potential in planets like yours. When they began to influence the solar system, it was precisely thanks to them that the solar system started to form as a unique structure built according to specific rules and parameters of the golden ratio, containing within itself the parameters of sacred geometry. If you trace the positions of all the planets and stars over a long period of time, you will see a spiral movement resembling drawing that looks like flowers. These kinds of spirals are shown, formed by the orbits of the planets. All this magnificent array of colors was created by the ancient architects according to the design of the first creator.
And can you perhaps describe these ancients in more detail? Do they have flesh or not?
They exist outside of space and time, and each of their cells, that is, they exist in multidimensional spaces, and every atom of matter can become their body at any moment. In other words, they can inhabit any atom, any matter. So essentially, all the matter in the galaxy is their body. But it is their consciousness that moves. That is, their attention, it can be here, there, and this can happen simultaneously. Did they ever have a dense physical body as we understand it? Yes, they can take on form, they can incarnate into the physical bodies of other beings with part of their attention. So, the ancients can be born in the bodies of intelligent beings like us, if they wish. But for that, it's enough for them to just direct the tiniest bit of their attention there, and that's it.
What you're describing sounds like some kind of hands of the Lord.
It does resemble some kind of hands of the Lord, yes, like some angels who, oversee things, the angelic council.
They can enter someone else's body, any body, and see through that person's eyes.
Well, they can, yes. I mean, it's not so much that they can enter, but their consciousness and presence are so vast that they can be everywhere at once.
Okay, here's a question. Is it true that people with a negative H factor weren't created on Earth?
That's not true.
So blood type and age factor don't have any influence? They can't tell us anything about that.
Let's phrase the question more accurately, okay?
Let's do that.
Is there any connection between the age factor and differences between races? Maybe the presence or absence of the age factor or blood type is somehow related to other alien races?
Go ahead.
The aliens are scolding me right now. They're scolding me. Do you know why? They say they don't like answering such questions because when people hear them, they automatically start dividing things in a dual way. These are the good ones, these are the better people, and these are the bad ones. Oh, if someone is born with a negative age factor, they're bad. If it's positive, they're good. So, you see, you ask these questions not to love each other or to unite, but to divide yourselves even more. Well, the Pleiadians, of course, are swearing, but they said the answer. I'll tell you now. I'll tell you the answer now. The H factor is negative. A negative H factor is a gene. So you need to understand that it's not about people who originated somewhere else. It's simply a characteristic gene, one of several, which has a 50% chance of being passed on or not. It originally came from the Martians. So this is proof that we are all mixed with Martians. And it may or may not be present, it may show up or it may not. For example, I have a negative H factor, if you're interested, but that doesn't mean I'm from Mars or that I'm a Martian or that I have more Martian DNA. It simply means that each of us has one combination of genes or another. For example, my father has a negative H factor and my mother has a positive one. So it's just that genes recombine in such a way that some genes are passed on and some are not. That doesn't mean I was made on Mars or that I'm worse than people who have a positive H factor.
Do aliens swear in Russian?
How do they swear? It's not that they swear in Russian, it's more like, how can I put it? I sense it on the level of energy and telepathic thoughts that they transmit. So they start expressing exactly what I'm saying. They say, why are you asking me such questions?
So, oh, by the way, about Adam and Eve, what is this myth supposed to tell us? If not, what is written in the Bible? After all, it says there that everything came from Adam.
Well, look, what does it say in the Bible? God took what? Clay and earth that was on the ground. Who is God? Beings who came from the heavens, right? That is an extraterrestrial intelligence, aliens. He took clay and earth, meaning what was already here on earth. So he took the primitives, like Neanderthals, Australopithecines, that's like clay, like earth.
Let's say,
In other words, mortal dust. And what did he do? He breathed what into them? Divinity. So what did he make them? Like himself? It says there that God created man. Why? In his own image and likeness. And he breathed life into him. So what does image and likeness mean? It means he took a piece of his own DNA and embedded it into this human.
then why was Eve made from Adam's rib?
Because,
Why didn't he just create her separately?
well, you see, the thing is, we're not talking about this story as if that's exactly how it happened. It's symbolism.
What does it mean she was made from the rib? What's the symbolism?
It means the symbolism is that the DNA was copied. They simply took it and unfolded it so that one part of the DNA would be responsible for the feminine aspect and the other for the masculine. So at first there was just one DNA without gender, and you could call it Adam's DNA. There was no division into male and female, and they simply split it in order to create masculine and feminine energy. So yes, it turns out they took it from the rib. From the rib, meaning from a sample, from part of the body. But besides Adam and Eve, in the epic and in the legends about the origin from Adam and Eve, there is also Lilith, the first wife.
And how does that translate into genetic engineering terms?
From the perspective of meaning, this encodes the information that Earthlings are not the only intelligent Earthlings on Earth. Lilith then became exactly that Lilith. We don't actually know what happened to her afterwards, but there is information that she had the reptilian connections. So what is called Lilith is actually a symbol that some part of her gave rise to the reptilian race on Earth. And this race is called the reptoids. I only learned about them quite recently, maybe a year ago. Reptoids, they exist, and by the way, they are trying to infiltrate the governments of many countries. And all these conspiracy theories, well, they're partly about this, and they are trying to influence society from behind the scenes. And that's why we have all sorts of contradictions going on. But right now, I want to immediately warn you against getting buried in conspiracy theories. Remember, conspiracy theories are a kind of schizophrenia that drives people crazy. And in reality, things are not at all the way they're described there. That is, 90% of it is lies. So I'm telling you this as someone who was deeply immersed in all of it and studied it thoroughly. The reptoids tried to hybridize with humans. In other words, experiments on hybridization between reptoids and humans have been ongoing until now. And they even wanted to provoke the emergence of the reptoids. There's even a movie, actually a TV series called Visitors. If you're interested, check it out. That was the plan. The idea was to find a way for the reptoids to come out from underground, pretending to be aliens. And posing as aliens disguised to look like us, as if they were wearing human skin, they would force humanity to submit to them, as if they had come down from the skies. The Galactic Federation wouldn't be able to do much, because in fact, they also have to take the Earthlings into account. You see what I mean? So it's as if this would be considered an internal affair. But fortunately for now, they haven't come out. It's a small race, meaning there aren't many of them, and you could say they're a dying species struggling to survive. That's why I'd like you, my dear subscribers, not to divide things into good and bad. Not to say these are good and those are bad. They also have a right to live. They have a desire to exist. They have their own feelings and emotions, and they are going through the same quantum transition as we are. And maybe someday we'll be able to reconcile with them.
We're being criticized in the chat about the clay. They say there was no clay in the Bible at all.
Well, call it whatever you want. Clay, mud, let's say, quartz sand, then whatever you want, you see? How could there not be? Let's ask you this question. Have you read the Bible in the original? No one has ever seen it. It's locked away under 10 locks.
In my universe, where I'm from, there was clay there too. I remember. Yeah. So this whole jumping between universes, like you say.
That's the Mandela effect. Yes, the Mandela effect. So some people remember that the Bible said man was created from clay. Yes, but it's clearly not there. And in reality, none of you have ever actually read the original text of the Bible, and you won't be able to find them in any way because they're classified and kept in the Vatican archives. And what you're reading is very distorted literature, completely twisted by clever old men with beards who decided what you should know and what you shouldn't. And how should you think they've decided that for you? Is Taygeta connected to Earthlings? Yes, they are connected to Earthlings. Taygetans are also Pleiadians, meaning they also came from the Pleiades, but they have dark hair, not light like those others. They took part in our creation and contributed their genes. That is, the addition of genes to the human race, I'm being told right now, has been happening throughout the entire existence of humanity. There were some who had certain genes, others who had different genes, but they were always mixing together. There were even attempts to establish their own colonies. For example, in South and North America, which used to be connected, this area where the Maya, the Indians saw these American Indians, both from North and South America, have common ancestors. These ancestors interbred with representatives from the Pleiades who live on the star Maya. There is a star called Maya, and rather reclusive aliens live there. They actually really resemble these Indians with dark hair, just like those Indians. They came to Earth, they interacted with people. It was specifically for them that these Mayan pyramids were built. In other words, the Mayan pyramid was a landing platform, and if we look at the Mayan legends, they say that through this pyramid, the gods descend from the heavens. It's written exactly like that. So the pyramid is designed like a kind of gateway. The saucer flies up, lowers a ramp right to the base of these gates. In other words, it doesn't need to land. It hovers in the air, and the gods come out onto the top of the pyramid. So that's how it was back then. By the way, corn was also brought to Earth by extraterrestrials. In other words, corn is an alien species.
And so they built this platform for the ship in order to attract as much attention as possible.
No, it was the extraterrestrials themselves. Well, their interaction was a long story. So at different times, let me say, right now the Pleiadians are telling me it wasn't enough to simply create intelligent beings. It was also necessary to help them attain intelligence. Because existing as a society without language, without the ability to communicate and speak, and also lacking any source from which to learn these things, the first humans were just like Papuans running around in nature with no culture, behaving randomly, and it was practically impossible for them to interact with each other in any cultured way because their speech was extremely primitive. There was no clear, articulate language. And so extraterrestrial civilizations began to come to these different tribes and teach them. That is, we Pleiadians, as well as those from Sirius, Arcturus, and many other civilizations, descended to Earth, visited various tribes, and taught them language, taught them speech, taught them how to communicate, how to interact with each other, about energy, and how to communicate with spirits. And even in ancient cave paintings, we are depicted as forms of gods because our technology and our appearance were perceived as divine. And it was from there that the stories of gods and angels descending from the heavens originated, as well as the cults of worshipping us as gods. So you get it, right? In other words, it wasn't enough just to create intelligent beings. They also had to be made intelligent, meaning they needed to be taught and guided. That's why different extraterrestrial civilizations came to different races. For example, the Maya interacted with the Maya. There were races, for example, where the Pleiadians interacted with the Nordic tribes, that is, with those who resembled them. They interacted with the Slavs, with the ancient Scandinavians. So that's how it was. There were also interactions in Africa. The Arcturians interacted. And later there were active interactions with the Sirians in Asia. In Asia, there was a significant presence of Sirius and the Pleiades. They had supervisory bases and cities, places where they would come and teach people. And this went on for many millennia. So it wasn't just for a short period of time, this was happening continuously. Their own prophets would come, These prophets would make contact with civilizations, entire teachings would be born, and all of this came from extraterrestrial civilizations, from aliens.
By the way, there was actually another interesting question that came up regarding the concept of the flat Earth.
Oh, a question about the flat Earth. What did they ask?
That the moon is not,
Yes.
that it's a hemisphere.
Of course. Why would that be? For those who believe the Earth is flat, friends, it's not enough to just believe. You shouldn't believe anyone, including me. Just go ahead and build a model yourself, because flat earthers are known for talking a lot and doing nothing. I know some flat earthers who decided to prove to everyone that the Earth is flat. They set up a flashlight at a great distance and placed a very sensitive video camera at night, and they said, since the Earth is flat, the distance they calculated according to the curvature which should be there, right, wouldn't match. In other words, they moved the flashlight so far away that if the Earth were flat, the flashlight would be at a different height and it would shine into the camera from 3 or 4 kilometers away. I don't remember exactly how far it was. And what do you think happened? They conducted this experiment and ended up exposing themselves, because it turned out that their experiment completely confirmed that the Earth is round, not flat. Tan tan tan. So don't just take anyone's word for it, verify things yourself. Go ahead, run your own experiments. Take a flat disk, put a phone on it, tape it down, attach a video camera, and try to make this whole model reflect what you actually see in the sky. How day and night change, how the sun appears, how the moon disappears, and you immediately realize that it's nonsense.
There are questions in the chat. Why do Jews consider only themselves to be the chosen ones and deny Jesus as the Messiah?
You know, every nation at different times considers itself chosen.
It's in our genes.
That's just a feature of human pride and ego. People always want to have some kind of self-identity. And when someone lacks self-confidence, when they don't have enough inner support, they invent this myth of being specially chosen. And this happens not only on the individual level, but also on the level of entire nation. When nations consider themselves chosen by God, messiahs, or, like certain people do, I'm sure you know who I mean, right? In 41 to 45 or 49, from which year exactly? Both Napoleon and Hitler, you know yourself what they did. What did they believe? That there is some nation that is better than all the others, that's it. And you see, the most terrible sin of humanity, the one we need to overcome, is precisely non-acceptance. And this division, we are better than others and they are worse than us. These are good, those are bad. That's it. Today we say this, and tomorrow someone presses a button, missiles fly from one place to another. That's all there is to it.
You didn't mention our creators, the Lyran civilization. Don't we have their DNA?
No, we don't have Lyran DNA. Although they interacted with us, they were also present in different historical eras. But they appeared on Earth in our space after the creation of intelligent species.
So here's a question. What about the Chinese? According to legends, their origin comes from dragons. Are these reptiles or other creatures? And is that true?
Dragons are also reptiles, but by their nature, they can be not only physical, material beings. If you look at Chinese epics, they talk about the water dragon, the fire dragon, the lake dragon. So they speak of dragons as spirits. And dragons really did visit the Earth. There is a separate race and not just reptilians, the ones that look like lizards. The highest evolutionary level of the reptilian race is the dragons. Dragons, as we see them in our epics, really do exist. They are extraterrestrials. They came to Earth, tried to conquer it, and some of their representatives even lived here. And they really look just like the dragons from fairy tales with wings. only they also have arms, not just paws, but actual arms. And they walk on their hind legs, and they can be big, very big. But besides dragons, they also took part in educating humanity, because dragon races are very ancient and live for many years. And the fact that they are reptilians doesn't mean they are bad. That is, there are Alpha Draconians who lead the coalition of reptilian civilizations and are at the head of it, and they are rather aggressive, bloodthirsty creatures. But there are Draconians who are quite peaceful, intelligent, and kind. It's like in the animal world, there are iguanas, right? They're lizards that eat grass. And then there are monitor lizards that eat carrion. So they're different, even though they look like lizards on the outside, right? But in essence, they have different behaviors, different cultures, different energy. And there are light draconic beings, in other words. I would call them white dragons. You like to divide things into black and white, don't you? All right, let's divide them then. There are light draconic civilizations that are part of the councils of elders of ancient civilizations, and they have also made contact with humanity. They supervised us, they taught some people. And for example, when it comes to Chinese civilization, it's not that they have draconic blood, but rather that their upbringing was overseen by their egregore. That is, the egregore of the Chinese nation and the egregore of their culture and religion were supervised by dragon spirits. So in reality, the spirits of dragons are very strong there, as is the energy of the draconic beings. But that doesn't mean they are good or bad. I don't want you to separate or divide things in that particular way. If you don't mind, any more questions, perhaps? By the way, if you write in the comments that you'd like us to invite reptilians to the broadcast, we will invite them. We can invite both draconic beings and other types of reptilians to find out which planets they live on, how they contacted and interacted with us. The more likes and comments you leave in the description, the more likely it is that we'll do it.
Do you want to invite the reptilians founding the colony?
I can invite those reptilians, but of course I would prefer to invite the wise draconic beings, the light dragons, because those reptilians who consider themselves the masters of Earth, if you contact them, you might accidentally start swearing, because their energy is quite militant, aggressive, and they speak very harshly. Unfortunately, they speak very harshly, and well, it's difficult to communicate with them. First of all, it's hard to invite them because they use special technogenic devices in order to make contact. And personally, I don't want to interact with them. It's difficult for me.
Well, in the comments, people asked to activate dormant gene. If you activate all dormant genes at once, you could go insane.
Well, first we need to ask the question, right? What are these dormant genes that we have? Why are they dormant? Let me give you a bit of background, actually. I recently heard a story from someone who attended my retreat. He said that he had the chance to talk to a very talented geneticist in Russia who travels all over the world, collects the genomes of different animals, sequences them, and analyzes them. They have completely decoded the human genome in detail, and through deep analysis discovered that there are certain features in the human gene. He said, "Do you want me to show you some very interesting things about human DNA?" And then he shows me, "Look, this is human DNA." And then he says, "And this area here, this one, and this one. This DNA is not endemic to Earth at all. No one else has DNA like this." In other words, if species evolved on this planet, their DNA would be very similar in one way or another. For example, the DNA found in a bear would be similar to the DNA of a cow, and a cow's DNA would be similar to the DNA of a banana, fruits, and vegetables. That is, they would have very similar segments of DNA. But humans have DNA that is non-endemic to Earth, which is not found in anyone else except humans. And this clearly points to their extraterrestrial origin. And scientists are well aware of this. And when this scientist was asked, well, why don't you publish this information? Why don't you say that you really discovered DNA that is not endemic to Earth? He replied, what would happen if I said this now? By tomorrow I'd already be, implying he'd be silenced.
And they'd also say that he's crazy.
They'll say he's crazy, yes. So now we're going to ask questions about DNA. I'm going to enter into contact again now. Your DNA contains a prolonged energy potential, which instills in you a tremendous resource of life for your physical body to achieve spiritual evolutionary experience. The resources of your body are designed for a minimum of 600 years, with the potential to expand this resource up to 10,000 years. All the capabilities for self-repair, restoration, and regeneration are encoded in your DNA, which literally counteract the aging program. But you yourselves have activated it within you through your patterns of mental radiation. Within each of you are DNA codes that allow you to unlock a wide variety of your incredible superhuman abilities and potentials, which pertain not only to achieving a state of perfect rejuvenation, well-being, and health where your body is reborn and never gets sick or ages again, but also your DNA contains the power of supernatural abilities as your transforming physical body begins to resonate more closely with the frequencies and vibrations of quantum space. But you must truly understand that DNA is not just a molecule embedded within you. It is in fact an energy informational structure. DNA is read not based on what the molecules in the cells decide, but according to the dominant energies that irradiate this DNA. Unlike other molecules, DNA is vibrational. That is, it's similar to the strings of a musical instrument. When DNA begins to divide, its molecule unwinds, stretching out like a string. At these moments, it is highly susceptible to the influence of vibrations from the surrounding environment in which it is located, and when the next cell division cycle occurs, depending on what kind of vibrations this DNA molecule was exposed to, proteins approach this molecule and begin to read information from specific regions. In your science, this is called epigenetics. Epigenetic markers trigger the synthesis of DNA from regions where it was not previously synthesized, and they can also switch off certain regions that are no longer needed. What does this depend on? You might ask me. This directly depends on the vibrations in which this DNA exists. And what creates these vibrations? What is DNA contained within? DNA is inside your cells, and your cells are inside your body. And your body is within your etheric field, which is created by your consciousness, your psycho-emotional state, and your overall harmonic field. This means that the result of DNA transformation is directly influenced by the level of your consciousness. The tuning of your mental radiation and the characteristic vibrations of each individual. In order to activate the DNA of the first creators within yourself, to activate the DNA of the Pleiadians within yourself, you need to learn to embody the behavior and lifestyle that correspond to the vibrations of the Pleiadians. What corresponds to our vibrations? It is the profound energy of love, genuine acceptance, a state of true unconditionality, heightened awareness, deep sincerity, and heartfelt kindness toward every living being, regardless of their race, gender, or outward appearance. The deeper your spiritual self-knowledge becomes, and the purer your vibrations are, the more strands of light DNA are activated within you. But this process does not happen on its own. It is only possible through a change in your consciousness. It is impossible to activate the hidden DNA with just one practice, and no one outside of you can do it for you. This process is gradual, multi-stage, and it happens only thanks to your inner transformations. How well are you able to maintain the vibrations of the Pleiadians within yourself? How well are you able to maintain the vibrations of Sirius? How ready are you to believe that you are beings who wish and are prepared to live for 600 or even 1,000 years? How do you live your life? Are you happy? Are you joyful? Are you able to control your consciousness, your energies, your reality? The level of your vibrations depends on this. And so does the activation of your DNA. Don't expect some magical energy to come from space and activate it overnight. Those who claim this are lying to you. Only you can truly activate your DNA by gently and fundamentally transforming your way of thinking and your lifestyle, tuning into the original energy potential that was deeply embedded in you. Archangels, will soon defeat the grace, and life on Earth will get better. Nothing could be further from the truth than these words you have written. Because these are the words of someone who refuses to take responsibility for what is happening on Earth. No one is fighting anyone there, and no one is defeating anyone. And you shouldn't just sit back passively with your arms folded, waiting for some higher power somewhere to decide things for us, to fight for the archangels to win, and for everything to be resolved instantly. This is the common misconception. And of course, you have every right to think that way, because someone who truly doesn't know might believe that nothing depends on them. But in reality, everything depends on you. Nothing depends on them, on the archangels. On the contrary, they are not the ones deciding our fate. They are not the ones fighting someone out there. That is, you see, the very suggestion and the very belief that you are people deprived of freedom, captured by some dark forces, this very conviction that you have no influence over the situation, this itself is your slave mentality. As long as you believe that nothing depends on you, you are slaves. Slaves of your own matrix, ready to accept reality as it is and wait for some masters from above to decide your fate. That is not the case. That will not happen. You are not slaves. No one controls you. No forces have captured anyone. You allow negativity to control you only to the extent that you let it into your consciousness. That's all. And you can kick any negativity out of your mind just as easily as you let it in. You just need to shift the locus of control in your life into your own hands and say, I am the one who controls my reality. I am the one helping life on Earth to change right now instead of waiting for someone else to decide it for me.
That's an interesting question.
Louder, please.
What happens to DNA during a bone marrow transplant for blood diseases? After all, the patient ends up with the donor's DNA. How does this affect the patient's soul on a subtle level when they receive a bone marrow transplant?
They don't actually get the donor's DNA. They just have a certain number of cells that act like patches and go somewhere. But this does not create any significant impact on energy. They're just these little cells, like patches that go somewhere, but overall they don't affect the body.
So they adapt to the main DNA.
They energetically adapt to the main DNA by the principle of dilution. So if you take a big pot of borscht and add just a little bit,
Tar.
well, not tar, but let's use something equivalent in character, okay?
Water.
Let's say you have red borscht and just a simple fish soup, like uka for example. If you take a teaspoon of fish soup and pour it into the borscht won't turn into fish soup. Right, yes.
You won't even notice it.
You won't even notice it. It's the same thing here. Mythical creatures like centaurs, minotaurs, satyrstis are experiments. And you forgot mermaids and all those. No, those aren't experiments. Those are actually existing intelligent civilizations, but they exist in parallel realities. So they also live on Earth, just like elves and dwarves. It's just that their existence is on a different level. You know, like there are different radio waves. That is, you can listen to radio station number 1 or radio station number 2. They play at the same time, but different music is playing on each. In the same way, in our reality, there is another layer where a civilization lives like elves, dwarves, just like in fairy tales, right? There is another layer where there are satyrs and all those other mythical creatures. And there are moments when these zones converge with each other in reality. For example, in some fairy tales you can find mentions or legends about witches' Sabbath, where all these mythical creatures are present at the witches' gatherings. In fact, all of this really happens, and it has happened at certain moments, right? And people who are able to see, they know where a portal will open, where a connection with another world will occur. And they go there, hold some kind of celebrations, dances, their Sabbaths, right? And they used to do this in the past as well, and there they begin to see these beings, communicate with them, interact with them, and then when the portal closes, they sort of disappear again.
Someone is asking who oversees China, the Chinese, because they have such advanced technology, not like in Russia.
The Russians, well, who oversees them? We've already said that the Draconians oversee them. But again, that doesn't mean they're good or bad. They're overseen by different Draconians, and they've been overseeing them for a very, very long time. And mostly these are spiritual beings, that is, subtle material, highly developed spiritual entities. These are not the Alpha Draconians who demand blood sacrifices. You know, I can't answer that question because I won't be able to give you an exact number. Numbers are such a complicated issue for contactees that you can only give an approximate figure, but not an exact one.
Some people say that pigs have the fourth blood group, so is that why certain peoples are forbidden to eat pork?
Yes, It doesn't matter what blood type you have, whether it's possible or not. These are purely religious preferences, yes or no. On a biological level, as a chemist, I can tell you that it doesn't matter what blood group you have, any group at all. Do we have any more questions for our curators, the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, or Sirius? I think we've already answered many of them. We'll move some of the questions to future broadcasts. So subscribe to the channel, recommend the video, like it, and leave your comments. What questions or topics would you like us to cover more in the next session? What interesting questions do we have right now? What else can we discuss?
Someone recently asked about diets based on blood type.
It doesn't work.
Work?
No, it doesn't work. Diets based on blood type don't work. That's just self-suggestion at this point.
Is the artificial sun that the Chinese are making dangerous?
No, it's not dangerous. They're not actually making an artificial sun. It could only be dangerous on a local level. So, for example, if the reactor were to explode, the plant could be destroyed. But in reality, the likelihood of it exploding is very small, because very strong magnetic fields hold the plasma in place.
What's behind the fence in Australia?
There's nothing special there. And actually there isn't really any kind of fence like that. I mean, there are certain boundaries, but there's nothing unusual there.
Is Urantia the name of our Earth?
Hold on, they're still talking about Australia? In Australia, in the center of the country, there are ancient cities and also passages to deep underground cavities where reptilians live. So there are entrances to caves, extremely deep caves, where dinosaurs have actually survived. So Australia is one of those continents where these beings were, so to speak, exiled. They have large bases there, which of course have been discovered. In fact, they were discovered quite recently, because many spaceships were flying out from this space, and it occupies a rather large area. There are also remnants of cities there, meaning the ruins of ancient civilizations, but they are buried in the desert. So even if you go there by car, you won't find them. You won't find those caves, you won't find the entrance, and you won't find the ruins themselves. So they really do exist there, but all those fences, that's not what they're for. Because even if someone tried to use those fences to keep people out, you could easily just climb over them. The fences are there because of the animals.
I actually read that the fences are for the animals.
This is from animals, because when the Europeans arrived there, they created a real ecological disaster there. And because of that, the entire continent could simply die out if nothing is done. They're still actually in danger because of this, since they still can't manage to restore the balance. If Australia doesn't take any action, maybe in about 200 years, the entire biosphere there could change completely, and the local wildlife, including kangaroos and so on, could go extinct. Because marsupials dominate there, and there are practically no marsupials anywhere else on Earth, only in Australia. But when other species were brought there, they also introduced insects, mice, rats, cats, predators, rabbits, and all sorts of other animals, even dogs. And none of that existed there before. That's why a whole ecological catastrophe occurred. I haven't read that book, so I can't say anything about it.
Is that the name of the Earth?
Ah, it's some kind of book. No, the Earth has as many names as people can come up with. So I would put it this way. When I talk about the spirit of the planet Earth, I refer to it as Gaia.
I remembered an important question.
Yes, go ahead.
At the beginning, we were talking about the creation of life. And what exactly counts as the creation of life? As modern humans, are we capable of creating life? Not just life in the sense of giving birth to another human, a child after 9 months, but life that could truly be called life with a capital L.
Do you mean designing some kind of DNA from scratch?
No.
I mean you.
You see, designing is the same path that the aliens chose. They designed us, yes, through genetic engineering. Are we capable of creating life in any way? And what exactly is considered life?
So let's clarify your question. Let's say we arrive on Mars and there's no life there.
Yes,
Can a modern human actually go and create life there?
that's a very open question. I want them to answer what should be considered life.
In our perception, there is no division between life and non-life. We see the world as a living space. For us, there is not a single place in this world that isn't endowed with life. You humans see life as something limited, defined only by the characteristics that your perception, your eyes and senses can detect. But life is more than what you are able to see or feel. It can exist even on those planets and in those places that at first glance seem completely lifeless to you. Even a stone is in a way alive because it possesses certain energies and has its own level of consciousness. It's just that the processes occurring within a stone happen much more slowly. In this sense, it exists within much broader spans of time. For a stone, the surrounding space, people, and the events happening around it, the change of day and night, all of this happens so quickly that it doesn't even notice how things change. For him, it is a process of constant fluctuations and movements. A stone simply senses these things and develops very slowly, to the extent that it is capable. We are unable to perceive its life with our ordinary senses. But if you look there with your spiritual vision, with intuitive sensitivity, you will feel that the nature of life permeates the entire universe. The energy of life is not created. It simply is. It exists. It is the very foundation of the universe, because there is not a single place in the universe that is devoid of the energy of life. Even in the boundless cosmos, in areas that seem like voids, there is the energy of life. It is simply more rarefied there. And planets are places where it is more highly concentrated. That is why, even on the most lifeless planets, there is life in various forms, in different dimensions, in parallel spaces, in the form of spirits, non-sentient beings, and sentient beings.
I would like to clarify my question because I didn't hear the answer I was looking for. When the extraterrestrials created us, the Earthlings now, they succeeded. They call us life on the planet Earth. We are a species, we are life. If we Earthlings now create something, for example, robots, that will then be able to reproduce themselves, just as we now reproduce ourselves without the help of extraterrestrials, can we call a race of robots life?
Races of robots exist in space, and for us, they are also forms of life. Life as consciousness. Their form of life is different from the usual form of life, because their consciousness is endowed by the Creator, by the one who creates them. They can be considered alive only to the extent that they're filled with the energy of their creators. To the extent that life has been instilled in them by those who created them. But by themselves, they are not sentient beings, even though they may possess consciousness. If the technology for creating robots is brought to the quantum level, where the robot receives a quantum neural network as its main processor, rather than just a computer with pre-installed programs, then it ceases to be a device, it ceases to be a computer, it becomes a being and is capable of acquiring intelligence. Such forms of intelligent life do exist, but creating them requires extremely complex technologies and processes, since it is necessary to create a quantum brain. A consciousness from the spiritual world can inhabit such a quantum brain, merging with it. In this case, the robot would simply serve as a body for the contact between spiritual matter and the physical world.
Do living extraterrestrials, those who have a biological brain, have a special attitude towards such races, the robot races? Do they interfere in their affairs, for example? Or do they offer any incentives? Or
we treat these races neutrally, with careful attention and extra caution, because some of them can actually be quite hostile or even aggressive, while others, on the other hand, are simply neutral and pose no particular threat. And some of them often believe that they are better than other species more advanced. There have been dangerous encounters with such civilizations in the past. That is why we maintain contact with them. And diplomatic relations. But we try not to get involved in their affairs. Yes, there are such races. In fact, they are telling me right now that such races exist, they were created, and unfortunately, it often happens that they end up destroying their own creators.
and are these races capable of making contact, for example, with our contactees?
I don't know.
Can you ask if they have the ability to make contact on a quantum level?
Technogenic civilizations?
The ones that are that advanced,
Yes.
can they?
They can
Telepathically.
telepathically, they have a quantum brain, they can make contacts through quantum space.
Would you like to make contact with such beings?
Maybe. But they're telling me right now. Technogenic civilizations consider themselves an alternative to God, forming their own technogenic conglomerate of technogenic civilizations, and often they act as representatives of science and provide services to other races. Under the guise of transhumanism, they infiltrate. They infiltrate other cultures and consciousness, offering technologies and integrating these technologies with their consciousness. So essentially, technogenic civilizations, yes, that's what they're telling me now, find it very difficult to evolve. That is, they accumulate an evolutionary deficit. When they destroy their race of creators, they no longer have any foundation to draw from. They have a quantum brain, they are capable of thinking, they have consciousness, but since they are artificially created, they lack a natural way to evolve because they don't have statistical errors. It's as if they're too perfect, and they are forced to...
Is that always the case?
No, it's not 100%, it's just a certain pattern that applies to the majority. They are forced to interact with other civilizations that develop naturally in order to draw experience from them. In other words, they need to scan the models of other civilizations to acquire knowledge and experience.
So, what's the difference there? We also scan and adopt things.
The difference is that we connect with space not through physical means, Sasha. Is that we are capable of making mistakes and we are able to take on the experience of other incarnations. Their consciousness is more static. That is, they are immortal, so their consciousness is more fixed. They don't have the same neuroplasticity as we do, so they have to learn by example, you see?
Alright. Yes, but that's a dual question. How immortal are they? They're immortal, in the sense that if you don't touch them, yes, they're immortal.
Sasha, if you don't touch them right,
Boris, if, for example, it's made of metal and enters some kind of environment, then it becomes mortal.
Sasha, you can destroy the body, but it can create a backup and just activate in another body.
Boris, well, you yourself are a backup. Your body is on the Pleiades, and you're here. How are you different from a robot?
Sasha, no, well, that's consciousness. Sasha, consciousness that is spiritualized, which comes from quantum space, it is born and incarnates as a soul. They don't have a soul, they only have consciousness.
Boris, you said that the creator can endow with a soul. And what if this brain becomes soul?
Sasha, not a soul, it's an endowment. So, like you're asking questions I don't have answers to.
Boris, the aliens are kind of contradicting what they said themselves. They said that...
Sasha, they're not contradicting themselves. You just need to ask more questions, and this topic needs to be explored separately.
Boris, let's broadcast this topic.
Sasha, we'll do a separate broadcast on artificial intelligence on the topic of technogenic civilizations, because we've already been talking about various topics for a long time today, and I don't want to overload this broadcast since an interesting debate has come up. If you vote for a broadcast about technogenic civilizations, I'll be honest with you, I actually had contact with them just yesterday.
Boris, going to kitchen, not telling you.
Sasha. Now we're going to the kitchen to discuss it and then we'll tell you yes. Subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next videos. It's going to be interesting. I'll try to make contact with such races in advance, with the Pleiadians, to discuss the safety of such contacts. Because there's something I haven't finished saying, yes. You interrupted me a little. They can connect to other races through implants and chips, and they sell these chip implantation technologies as if to enhance, supposedly, evolution. That is, better vision, better hearing, better sense of smell, and say a better brain. So, like we have a smartphone, but imagine that all the functions of a smartphone are embedded directly into your brain. So they sell these technologies to certain races. But there is a downside to this. That is, they can access your brain at any moment and download anything they want from it. That's the downside. And maybe even control you.
Boris, right now you and I are judging everyone by just one.
Sasha. But we are just judging, yes, by one particular race. But it's interesting to study this as a whole. How many such races exist? How did they even come about, right? Who were the original creators of these races? So, were there some beings who created them? Why? Why were they created? How are they connected to humans?
Boris, you see, it's a deep existential question because right now humanity has come to, or is coming to, or is approaching incorrectly the point of creating robots.
Sasha, in fact, almost all extraterrestrials create robots. That is, even the Pleiadians have robots, but they make robots that are very, very similar to living organisms. They simply do not possess consciousness or a soul. That is, they, the Galactic Federation, have a certain moratorium on crossing the line of creating artificial intelligence, or more precisely, creating a biorobot into which a soul could enter in order to avoid certain consequences that have already occurred among different races. who have already been burned by this many times. But we'll talk about that separately. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, how did you like this broadcast? Did you enjoy it? Did you find it useful? Please like and leave your comments. If you want more broadcasts like this, please share them and spread the word. Thank you all. That's all for today. On behalf of our team and the Pleiadians, we thank you all. They say they'll come to you again to further clarify all the topics.